Wow, I just had a really interesting experience. So I have to cover my shirt because it's my company name and people don't need to know where I work. But I was just visiting one of my transitioning patients. She's actually like actively dying. And we were just like, I was just, around the bed with, her daughters, and we're talking, we're having a conversation, just talking about a bunch of random things. And, we come out of the room, we're in the kitchen talking. Well, no, excuse me, in the room, I got a phone call. My phone was on vibrate. I forgot that I turned it on vibrate, so I felt my pocket vibrating. It's like, oh, I got a call. I'm thinking that it's the number, it was a Blue Island number. If you're in Illinois, you know that. I thought the area code, like the number calling, was a different, like, patient's family member. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, I have a patient in that area who's also actively dying. Maybe, this is the phone call. And I saw that I had a voicemail left, right? So when we're in the kitchen, I'm talking to the patient's daughters, and I'm telling them, because this patient specifically, today is Tuesday, she hasn't opened her eyes or talked or did anything. Like, she's kind of been like in a comatose state since, I want to say it was Saturday. When I came to my visit yesterday, as soon as she heard my voice, she opened her eyes. She tried to look at me. She started moving. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, was she waiting to see me, hear me? And, I was the only person that was able to arouse her, over the past 2 days. Obviously when I came today, she wasn't, waking up. She wasn't moving, opening her eyes, none of that. But I was, talking to them about I try as a nurse, especially in this line of work, to keep kind of a little bit of a barrier, and not like in an informal cold way, but just I have to protect my mental health and my own well-being as well, because this job, when you work in hospice, you see people die all day every day, and so it can be emotionally taxing and draining. And so I do my best to try to keep a little bit of a barrier, but there are some patients and families who just poke through that barrier and knock it down, and you get really close, and you get attached. And so I'm telling them about a patient that I had lost back in I want to say it was back in March, if I remember correctly, or either April, one of the two. And I was very close to that patient. She was with me for about 9 or 10 months. I got really close with her daughter, love her daughter down. We are still like this. And I was telling them about her, and I was like, I think your mom might be a close, second to that. Not like she's second place to that patient, but just she might be another one who I just will remember her, and it'll be difficult for me to forget her because of how impactful just she is. And so I leave the visit, I get in my car, and I check my phone because I had a missed call. So I'm thinking, and I'm like, oh, I have a voicemail. Let me listen to the voicemail. Well, it was only a 6-second silent voicemail. There was no talking. There was no nothing, just a silent voicemail. And so I call the number back, and I didn't hear the name of the facility. I thought it was a different facility that I have another patient at. So I'm, talking to the receptionist, and she's like, oh no, we don't have a patient here by that name. And I'm like, wait, what facility did you say this was again? And she says the name. And I was like, oh, well, yeah, I had a patient here who died back in March or April. I forget now which month it was. But I'm like, yeah, I had a patient there who passed. And the receptionist was like, okay, hold on. She puts me on hold for a few seconds. And then she comes back and she's like, yeah, nobody called regarding that person. I'm not sure why you got a call, but yeah, no one called. And I was like, what the heck? I was literally just talking about that patient, or thinking about her, and for me to have a missed call with a silent voicemail from that facility that patient was at, and nobody called me. I had to call that family back that I was just with, and I told one of her daughters, you will never believe what the heck just happened. We were just talking about how impactful this patient was to me. Obviously I didn't share specifics of names or anything like that, but just explaining to them how impactful this patient was for me and how difficult her passing was, because it was in hospice, things aren't necessarily unexpected, but her passing was unexpected because nobody saw it coming. Like, she wasn't showing signs that she was going to pass before she passed. And so I was just like, I just like shook it up, because like, what the heck? Like, things happen to me, but this might by far be one that is just like, it takes the cake of like strange things that have happened. Like, I've never had that happen, and I'm shook. So I don't know, but like in a good way, because I'm smiling. So like, I feel good. Like, my girl's with me, you know, she be looking out, and she just wanted to say hi, I guess.
Now that is interesting. All right. And before we even get to the biblical side of this, I want to make this very clear. I'm not going to sit here and say that this hospice nurse is lying. I'm also not going to sit here and tell you that her former patient called her from the other side, because I know a lot of y'all are probably thinking that, because those are very two clear distinctions. Okay. But what she describes was a very strange experience. It really was. And I feel like a lot of people who work in the nursing industry, especially hospice, they see a lot of things. She was dealing with an active dying patient who was transitioning, and eventually she checks it out. But after that, she got a missed call, and that missed call came from the same facility that their dying patient had actually passed away. Called the number back, and according to the account, nobody called you. Nobody called you one bit. Then that would freak somebody out. That would freak me out. Okay. I'm not going to pretend like it wouldn't. Okay. If I'm sitting there talking about somebody who just passed away, and then all of a sudden you get a missed call from that same facility where the person passed away, and you call them back, don't hear anything, but you listen to the voicemail and it's just 6 seconds of silence. Yeah, I'm gonna have some questions. I'm gonna have to question this, okay? But this is where I think Christians have to be careful, because there's a difference between saying, I experienced something that I can't explain. I experienced something supernatural, but then also saying, therefore, I know exactly what caused it. Because honestly, there's a clear difference and there's a clear distinction between the two. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 21, but test all things, hold on to what is good. It doesn't say ignore everything unusual or mock everything supernatural, but it also doesn't say to believe every single thing either. It says test it. So that means as Christians, if we are true believers, we should not be the most gullible person in the room. We should truly take a step back and have biblical discernment. Now, there could have been a completely ordinary reason why she received a phone call from that facility. Maybe somebody called her by accident. Maybe there was a phone system issue. Maybe somebody actually called her and forgot. That might have been some of the things that might have happened. We just don't know. And neither does she. But I think that's the exact point. Because honestly, we just don't know. Sometimes saying that I don't know is actually okay. That's the most biblical response to this particular thing, because I think Christians can get themselves into trouble when we feel like we try to over spiritualize every single thing and every single mysterious coincidence. And it has to be some type of revelation. It has to be God trying to reveal something to us. Every dream becomes prophetic. Every number becomes a sign. Every coincidence becomes God speaking. And now every unexplained phone call becomes somebody communicating from beyond the grave. And we got to slow down on that. We have to, not because God can't do supernatural things. No. The entire Bible is full of supernatural events, but because Scripture repeatedly, and I mean repeatedly, warns us about spiritual claims, and they all have to be tested. So that brings us to 1 John chapter 4, verse 1. Dear friends, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see if they're from God, because many false prophets have gone out into this world. John doesn't say supernatural activity is impossible. He says the opposite. He acknowledges the spiritual claims and then tells the believers, don't automatically believe them, but I want you to test them. And that's true discernment. Now, does the Bible teach us that the dead comes back to check in on us or make sure we're okay? I think that's a biblical question for us to truly ask ourselves, because I think sometimes we get that feeling and we have those conversations. Somebody would say, man, my grandmother was watching over me. My dad, he sent me a sign. My friend who passed away, he visited me, and they were looking out for me. And I understand why people will say those things. You know, I used to say those things about my grandmother who passed away. And I feel like, hey, you know, my grandmother's watching over me when I do something or when I achieve something. I'm always saying, man, I know she's seeing me right now, you know, just, you know, doing these things. And I understand death hurts. We miss people. And sometimes we desperately want that reassurance and that comfort that they are still there and that relationship isn't completely gone, especially the physical one. But as Christians, our comfort has to come from what God has already actually revealed, not simply from what we want from experiences, and especially from spiritual experiences too. But I want to know what you all think. If you were this hospice nurse, how would you feel about receiving this particular type of phone call? I would like to know what you all think in the comment section down below. Make sure you hit a like for the algorithm, subscribe if you enjoy more faith-based content, and please share this with your family and friends so that we can be a blessing to each other. Until the next time, be blessed.